2:17 a.m., November 4th, 1993. Location: a sterile, sound-dampened room in a nondescript government building on the outskirts of Berlin. The air is thick with the scent of stale coffee, cold sweat, and the ozone of a single, overworked desk lamp. For 78 hours, the man known as Mikhail had not flinched. A product of the finest counterinterrogation training the Eastern Bloc could offer, he had met every threat, every psychological ploy, every fabricated piece of evidence with the granite-like calm of a chess master playing a preordained game. His interrogators, two seasoned officers from a Western agency, were reaching the frayed ends of their own resolve. The files before them spoke of a ghost, a man who had woven himself into the fabric of a foreign nation, siphoned its secrets for a decade, and left no trace but the silent aftershocks of his actions. They had tried everything, and then one of them, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion, leaned forward, bypassing the dossier of high treason entirely. He asked a single, quiet, devastatingly simple question. It was not about dead drops, encryption keys, or political masters. It was a question about a thread. And in that moment, the unshakable spy, Mikhail, did the impossible. He panicked. His breath hitched, his hands, steady for 3 days, began a microscopic tremble. Within the hour, he was talking, confessing not just to acts of espionage, but to the life he had buried to perform them. This is the story of the power of that question, an exploration of the human psyche behind the legend of the spy, and a deep dive into why the most sophisticated defenses can crumble not under force, but under a sudden, unexpected glimpse of the self. The fortress of the self, how a spy is built. To understand the cataclysm of a confession, one must first appreciate the monumental architecture of a professional spy's identity. We're not speaking of hobbyists or ideologically driven leakers, but of the career intelligence officer, the illegal or deep cover agent. Their craft is not merely gathering secrets. It is the systematic demolition and reconstruction of the self. They're trained to become a perfect fiction. Every gesture, every taste in music, every childhood memory of their legend is painstakingly crafted, rehearsed, and internalized until it overwrites instinct. Their training involves mastering the art of dissociation, the ability to compartmentalize their true self into a locked vault deep within their psyche, while the constructed persona operates on the surface. They learn to control physiological responses, heart rate, pupil dilation, microexpressions. Holographs become puzzles to be solved, not threats. They're taught to build mental fortresses with walls made of ideology, duty, or cold professional pride. Interrogation, for them, is not an assault on truth, but a test of their art. They expect the bludgeon, the threats, the sleep deprivation, the confrontational accusations. These are external pressures pushing against their external shell, and the shell is designed to withstand it. The interrogator's goal is to find a crack in the legend. The spy's goal is to be the legend, utterly and completely. This was Mikhail. He was a ghost inhabiting a meticulously crafted mannequin. For 78 hours, he defended the fortress. He argued the logic of his cover story, expressed righteous indignation at his detention, and retreated into a serene, almost bored, silence when pressed. He was winning. His interrogators, let's call them Agent Clark and Agent Miller, were chasing a shadow. They had satellite photos, financial anomalies, and circumstantial evidence that screamed his guilt. But they needed the key, the confession, the motive, the human connection that would turn data into a narrative for a courtroom. They were stuck outside the walls. Part 2. The Architecture of Collapse, Psychology Beyond Torture. Modern interrogation science has largely moved past the myth of physical torture as an effective truth extraction tool. Pain and fear often produce compliance, not truth. The subject will say anything to make the pain stop, fabricating elaborate stories that send investigators down infinite rabbit holes. The real battlefield is the mind. Effective interrogation aims to induce a state of cognitive dissonance, the profound psychological stress experienced when one holds two contradictory beliefs or when actions betray deeply held self-perceptions. For a spy like Mikhail, his core, hidden self-perception might be, I am a loyal patriot performing a difficult duty. His constructive persona's claim is, I am an innocent businessman. Under normal pressure, these can coexist in separate compartments. The goal of a skilled interrogator is to force a collision. Techniques like the Schrodinger's evidence ploy. We have a witness who places you at the scene. We're not sure if they're reliable yet, but if they are, your cooperation window slams shut. Create uncertainty and erode the subject's sense of control. Empathy building by one interrogator, I understand the immense pressure you must have been under, can soften defenses, while the other applies pressure, creating a psychological good cop/bad cop dynamic that is more about emotional manipulation than theatrical performance. But Mikhail was trained against these scripts. He recognized the plays. He could identify the attempt to create dissonance and wall it off. The fortress had countermeasures for siege weapons. What it wasn't prepared for was an earthquake from within. The question, a needle through the armor. Agent Miller, the more intuitive of the two interrogators, had spent the silent hours not just reviewing the spy's file, but the life of his legend. He studied the fabricated biography. Born in Montreal, father a schoolteacher, mother a librarian, an unremarkable childhood, a degree in electrical engineering. He looked at the artifacts they had from Mikhail's apartment. Books, grocery receipts, a half-knitted sweater, a sewing kit. The breakthrough wasn't in a coded message. It was in a mundane, overlooked detail. In Mikhail's, or rather his legend's, apartment, agents had found a small, old-fashioned sewing kit. Among the neutral-colored spools of thread was one that didn't fit. A single spool of vivid, almost iridescent emerald green silk thread. It was distinctive, expensive, and utterly out of place with the rest of his carefully curated, deliberately bland possessions. At 2:17 a.m., after another circular and fruitless exchange, Miller changed tack entirely. He slid a photograph of the sewing kit, the green thread circled across the table. He didn't mention state secrets or betrayal. He asked, in a tone of genuine, almost anthropological curiosity, Mikhail, the green thread in your sewing kit, it's such a specific, beautiful color. It doesn't seem like something you'd use to mend a button. It looks like the kind of thread someone would use for embroidery, for something personal, maybe decorative. Can you tell me, what did you use it for? The room didn't shake. No alarm sounded. But the effect on Mikhail was instantaneous and visceral. The panic, his eyes, which had been fixed on a neutral point on the wall, snapped to the photo. The color drained from his face. His breathing, which had been measured and deep to control heart rate, became shallow and quick. This was not the controlled fear of a caught agent, but the raw, disoriented panic of a man whose hidden world had been unexpectedly referenced in the public one. Why it worked? The question was a psychological masterstroke for several reasons. It bypassed the legend. The question wasn't about his fabricated history. It was about a tiny, real action performed by his hidden, true self. The legend had no prepared answer for the green thread. It was profoundly human. It spoke to personal taste, to memory, to a private moment of creation. It wasn't an accusation of being a spy. It was an inquiry about being a person, a dimension of himself he had walled off completely. It implied they knew his soul. For Mikhail, that thread was a tiny, secret rebellion, a thread, literally, connecting him to his past. Perhaps it was a color his real mother loved, or a shade from his hometown. It was a minuscule flaw in his otherwise perfect construction, a secret he kept even from his handlers. By noticing it, the interrogator communicated, we see you. Not the legend, but the man hiding inside it. And if we see this, what else do we see? It created unmanageable dissonance. In that moment, the two compartments of his mind, the spy and the man, violently collided. The careful dissociation failed. The question forced his true self to engage in the interrogation. The fortress was breached from the inside. Part 4. The confession, the unspooling of a life. The panic was the crack. Once it appeared, Agents Clark and Miller applied gentle, relentless pressure to that single point. They didn't return to missiles or memos. They stay with the thread. Did it remind you of someone? It seems like a color you'd pick for a gift. Was it for someone you couldn't send a gift to? The green thread became a metaphor for every connection he had severed, every truth he had suppressed. The dam broke. Mikhail didn't just confess to his acts of espionage. He began to talk about why he held on to that thread. He spoke of his real mother, of a lake near his real hometown that turned that specific shade of green in the summer, of the crushing loneliness of a life lived as a fiction. The confession of operational details came almost as an afterthought, a secondary reality to the primary, psychological confession of his own humanity, which he had been forced to acknowledge in that room. He confessed because, in the end, the interrogator's question did the one thing his training could not defend against. It made him homesick for his own life. It reminded him, with unbearable acuity, of the person he had sacrificed on the altar of his duty. To defend the legend was to annihilate that last, tiny, real part of himself, the part that cherished a spool of emerald thread. He chose, in that moment of panic and clarity, to save the man, even if it meant sacrificing the spy. Part 5. The unseen thread in all of us, the universal vulnerability. The story of Mikhail and the green thread is not just a spy thriller anecdote. It is a powerful parable about human psychology. We all construct personas for work, for social circles, for family. We all compartmentalize, and we all have our green threads, the small, certain private, seemingly illogical things that connect us to our core, unvarnished selves, a saved ticket stub, a recurring dream, a favorite childhood recipe, a secret kindness we never speak of. These are our vulnerabilities because they are our humanity. They are the keys to our authentic selves. Any confrontation, whether in an interrogation room, a therapist's office, or a heated personal argument, that successfully bridges the gap between our constructed self and these deeply personal anchors, has the power to create profound emotional resonance and trigger unexpected honesty. The trained spy is simply the extreme example of this human condition. His fortress is stronger, his dissociation more complete, but its foundational weakness is the same as ours, the irreducible, persistent, and often sentimental core of individual identity. No amount of training can completely erase the human need for authentic self, however small its footprint. Conclusion: the echo in the silence. The case of Mikhail was closed. The secrets were recovered, networks were rolled up, and the wheels of justice turned. But the lasting lesson from that sterile room at 2:17 a.m. is not about tradecraft or counterintelligence. It is about the power of the specific, the personal, and the human to shatter the most elaborate abstractions we build around ourselves. The most effective question was not the broadsword of accusation, but the scalpel of intimate observation. It proved that the path to the truth often lies not through the grand narrative of crime and punishment, but through the quiet, overlooked details of a life, the threads, both literal and metaphorical, that connect a person to their own story. In the end, the one thing a trained spy, or any of us, may fear most is not exposure of our lies, but the unexpected recognition of our truth. A question for you, the reader. We all have them. Those small, private, perhaps seemingly insignificant objects, habits, or memories that feel uniquely and deeply connected to our most authentic self, separate from the roles we play in the world. They are our personal green threads. My question to you is this: what is your green thread? And what do you think it is about that specific thing that makes it such a potent anchor to your true self? I am genuinely curious. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's explore this hidden landscape of identity together.